welcome to My Smart Tech TV. This week I'm joined by David Francis, who's the CEO and co-founder at Virtual Method. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
So to start off with, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about you and what Virtual Method do.
Yeah, certainly. So I've been in this industry, I would call it, which is immersive technologies, augmented virtual reality, etc., for about 11 years now. First of all, working with a pioneer out of the US called Daiquiri, and then I established probably one of the first AR/VR divisions within an enterprise in Australia, a company called Blue Star, now called IVE Group, and built some capabilities there for a few years, and started Virtual Method in 2016. And Virtual Method, we specialize in. We're very focused in augmented and virtual reality and all the other realities that, people like to come up with almost every second day, but very much a technology that is the next major computing platform that is going to be overlaid upon the world, overlaid upon probably screens in front of our eyes, and then will be the way that we interface with digital data hybridized onto our physical environment.
Awesome. And so just for people listening who might not know, what's the difference between AR and VR?
Sure. So augmented reality, I like to use a bit of pop culture. So augmented reality is like Tony Stark in Iron Man when he's in his workshop, and how he brings up the holographic screens and he's moving things like that, which we would call gestural interface. But he can still see the world, but he's seeing that digital content. That is augmented reality, means you can, and that content has a quasi physical relationship to the real world, so that, if you move forward, it sticks in the real world and moves past you like any actual real world object would. That's augmented reality. Virtual reality is more like Ready Player One, Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One. And in it, they call it the Oasis. It's also known as, the metaverse, although that's an evolving phrase, but it's where you can put on a VR headset and you basically go into another world entirely. And you can move your hands around and move through space, but you got to kind of make sure that you're in a room where you've got enough space to move around. It's a complete escapism in many ways.
That's awesome. And you said that there's other ones coming through every day. Feels like this, what are some of the other ones that are coming out?
Well, I mean, there's actually another form of reality, legitimately, that we would refer to as assisted reality.
Okay.
Using a device like the RealWear HMT1 here. It's a heads-up display, a little screen that sits just beneath your eye. And it's got a camera there, and it's all voice activated, hands-free. So I can just speak to it and make it do things and control the screen that I can see, which is Android powered. It's like a high-end Android tablet that I wear on my head. And we would call this assisted reality because we're not really overlaying virtual things in the world around. We're just basically putting a screen in a very convenient position and creating a new interface, a new way to, either go into a call, like a Zoom call like we're in now, for example, and have someone see through your eyes because you're a doctor that wants to talk through a procedure that you're doing, or you're an engineer who's at the edge that needs a bit of help because you've never come across this wiring system before, so you have to phone someone who's on the other side of the world. This is assisted reality, but there are a lot of other phrases out there, like Deloitte and Accenture were quite late to the party, so they made up their own terminology to try and own it very quickly. Extended reality, I think, is Accenture, and digital realities is Deloitte. And then there's kind of a catch-all phrase, XR, for augmented and virtual reality. There is spatial computing, which is kind of being used by Amazon. So there's because this is such a big opportunity, who's going to own this next major computing platform? Everyone's trying to put their own moniker on it. But at the end of the day, the company who wins is the company that is going to convince everyone to get rid of their PCs, their phones, their TV screens, every other sort of visual digital interface device, and wear something like a pair of glasses that literally just overlays all of that around you. Whoever gets those glasses on your face, whatever they call it, is going to be what it becomes. And I strongly suspect on a consumer level, that will be Apple.
Okay.
It's the biggest. My prediction is that I believe Apple may release their eyewear in October this year. If they do, it'll be the biggest product launch since the iPhone in 2007. And they've been working on it longer than anyone else. They put more money into it than anybody else. It is a huge secret inside Apple, but it is definitely happening. And if they push it out to consumers, then it'll change everything. And suddenly this industry, which is growing very fast now, will absolutely boom.
And go way more mainstream as well, because some people really don't not aware of what's out there. But yeah, if a company like Apple puts their stamp on it, then people will certainly get behind it. But you talk about it's the company that can convince people why these wearables are better than a PC or a handheld. From your perspective, what is the benefit? Why choose this over that?
Well, if you look at what's available today, I mean, so you've got, for example, the RealWear HMT1, and at the moment, a lot of, ICT teams inside organizations are saying to their workers in the field, hey, take this like ruggedized phone or tablet out with you. And if you need help, make a call on it and hold it while you're trying to use your tools and keep your weight balanced and open a door and hold it steady. No, you're moving the camera, hold it steady. And also keep yourself safe, because safety is paramount. So the idea of having to hold a device in the field is pretty crazy. And to be honest, as much as a lot of ICT teams sit there and they look at the latest ruggedized tablets and they go, wow, that looks awesome, the men and women in the field go, I'm leaving this in the ute and I'm just going to ride it on my hand. And at the end of the day, I'm going to get back in the ute and turn the aircon on, and then I'll open the tablet and then I'll enter the stuff. And hopefully it's right. So it makes sense from a safety perspective. It makes sense from even a cognitive load perspective, right? So if I'm taking a lot of measurements, like I'm an engineer in the field and I have to measure things up, or I'm a mine blasting engineer and we're drilling holes and I need to measure the depth to see how much explosive we put in them, for example, because if you put the wrong amount, it'll be a bad blast and cost millions of dollars. And I'm transposing all this data. I mean, another great example actually is nurses taking biometrics like temperature, blood pressure, all that sort of thing, and they're recording it all. As human beings, we've got a thing called the phonological loop. It means that if you can receive data and within 3 seconds make a decision or transpose that data, then you use zero cognitive load and the accuracy of the data will be incredibly high. Beyond 3 seconds on the dot, you have to then turn it into a memory, a neural synapse, and having to memorize it as you go, oh, where's my phone? Where's my piece of paper? I've got to write that measurement down. The chances of it being wrong are quite high. And certainly by the end of the day, you feel like you've just sat your finals exams again because your head is just full of numbers. So with this device, you can read something and just as you're reading it, it just goes bang and puts it into the database. And even that alone is very compelling. It's just very hard to communicate sometimes to ICT teams the impracticalities of digitization in the field, of what these field workers who are at the edge of the edge are trying to manage, like how fully physical their job is, how the heat is bearing down on them. And, IT teams go, oh, well, we'll give them an iPad. iPad's awesome, secure, Apple, which overheats at like 32 degrees ambient temperature. And they give that to workers who are working in northern Queensland during the summer. And so these workers are then having to try and cool down the iPad to make it turn on again. And there's a disconnect between operational technology and information technology, which, the conversation around these devices helps bridge.
Way more practical. You're right. That sounds, yeah, that could be an absolute nightmare. You mentioned obviously field workers, nurses. What other industries would use these types of technologies?
So there almost isn't an industry I can think of that wouldn't use it. I mean, even one of my colleagues just had a baby in the last 48 hours, and his sister is in Sydney and he's in Perth. So he wore the device to actually go into a call and be able to hold and handle and keep safe the baby while he was actually then streaming vision of the baby over Zoom back to his sister in Sydney. So, I mean, if you think of, I mean, we even have it with like food franchise companies who want to make sure that the standards of all these franchisees are up to par for the brand. So having someone who can see through the eyes of operators in the field and go, right, are you making the sandwiches properly? Are you presenting everything properly in accordance with the franchise brand? Or IT people, because IT is not necessarily always jumping on TeamViewer and looking, you know, through someone's screen. Sometimes it's physical. It's like, wait up, is the LAN plugged in at the back? Just put this device on and let's go and look at the server you have on site. Let's look at the back of the computer, and hopefully I can help get things back online if they're, you know, physical and not just virtual. But mining, oil and gas, defense, and health, as you mentioned, utilities, other industries, aerospace, automotive. I mean, you name an industry, and I mean, all of the Fortune 500 companies now are actually using this device, for example, to some degree. I guess it's another thing that a lot of people don't know about is just the enormous level of adoption that is happening in the enterprise, and especially in the last year and a half because of COVID. I mean, before, if you needed to go and have a look at something, you could go, oh, I'll just get on a plane. But no one can do that. So now you need a better way to actually collaborate and see through someone's eyes and get a better sense of what they're doing in the field. So much so that in the oil and gas industry, I know the oil and gas companies are now saying, as part of, you know, being a vendor, you need to tell us what your remote expert strategy is. What software are you using? What hardware are you using? Why did you choose it? How is that going to cause the best operational benefit for you to support our workers if we choose you as a vendor for our business? Because the last resort is you getting on a plane and coming to see us. We don't, thanks for the service, but we've had all this downtime while we wait for you to get there. So tell us how you're innovating to better support the equipment or whatever you have on our site. So that's a really interesting evolution that we're seeing now.
What do you think, what do you think is holding the companies back that aren't getting on board with this?
I think the biggest thing that's holding them back is there's a fear, like a trauma, of introducing new technology to workers. And there's a real worry that the workers in the field are not going to see this as being of enormous benefit, that are going to see it as some sort of something that actually inhibits them from doing their job. What we are actually, I mean, that is the prediction that a lot of, executive heads make about the way their workers will and won't adopt technology. But it just depends how much of a solution that technology is and how quickly that solution can be appreciated by those workers in the field. And you've got to make sure that your onboarding is good. Like any new technology, you arrive in a new company and they go, oh, here's your phone. You go, oh, it's Android. You go, yeah, we only use Android, but I'm iOS. Well, too bad. There's your Android phone. You go, oh, how does this work? Oh, so I can go back a screen, but you get used to it. You just play with it for half a day and you go, okay, not so bad after all. I can use this. Same thing with, wearable technology. You just need good onboarding, which we provide a lot of companies, and, make sure that initial experience is good, that people don't feel stupid or they get embarrassed or anything like that. And once that's done, if it really solves a big problem for them, which it really does in terms of having two hands free, then we get a really amazing response from workers in the field. And very surprising quite often for, the IT teams that are naysayers about whether or not those edge engineers are actually going to adopt.
Yeah, and sometimes you've got to see it to believe it, but people are definitely creatures of habit, and it can be the best technology in the world, but sometimes until people can actually, try it out and see something, they can be quite resistant to change. Across all these different industries that you've mentioned, are there any that you think need it the most? Like who would benefit from this the most out of all the different groups that you mentioned?
Well, I mean, literally right this second, health. And I've reached out and probably, a lot of the health facilities are a bit too busy to take things under consideration, but I've reached out to them, just say, we'll support you for free. And because I know that so many of them are stretched in terms of ICUs at the moment dealing with COVID patients. And one of the major things that major dangers for health professionals is when they get in and out of PPE, when they go in and out of the infectious zones, right, the red zones. So if you can reduce the amount of times they need to do that, like the amount of times you need a certain health professional to come in to do an assessment, because which could be a doctor or a specialist, for example, you've already got a nurse there who that specialist, just through their phone or PC, can dial in through that nurse's eyes and see everything they need to see and provide, do an assessment, provide instruction very, very easily. And all of it is, PPE compatible and sanitized and all that sort of thing. That's a really powerful use case just straight off the bat. But certainly that aside, for any business that is distributed right now and is trying to democratize their knowledge across the organization, because those who hold the knowledge can't go to places. And that's a very broad remit, but certainly that's what a lot of companies are suffering from. And COVID aside, there's a lot of businesses too that have older workers that are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And there's a lot of knowledge locked in those workers' heads. 750 workers a day retiring from the Australian workforce. And if you don't get that knowledge out of their head, you can have some TAFE grad follow them around with pad and pen or an iPad or whatever and try and capture a bit, but you're not going to get it. You're going to get, 2 parts of nothing. So if you can put, say, a device like this on someone's head and say, Tom, mate, you are retiring this time next year, and we know that you have a lot of very special knowledge around, dealing with this water systems or sewage or whatever. Whenever you come across something that you have that special knowledge about, just say, my camera, start recording, and then just go, hey, it's Tom here. I'm in this section that flooded here in Brisbane when we had the floods a few years back. And I'll tell you what, the way we worked out how to fix it was pretty special. And I'm going to talk you through it now, because if this flood happens again, it probably will, and I'm gone and I'm retired, this will cost you tens of millions of dollars. So let me just cut that cost for you. What we did is 1, over there, 2, we then went there, 3, we turned this off, 4, we did this. And you record that data, and 5 years later, Tom's retired in Port Macquarie playing golf. The floods happened in Brisbane again, and Susan's gone down to check that sewer and said, oh, no, I've never seen this before. And someone said, I'm going to send you this video, just watch it. Tom recorded this before he retired. And so Susan watches it and is going, pause. Okay, step 1, pause. I'll do that. Step 2, pause. I'll do that. And you've got that transfer of knowledge. And that's critical. And probably, according to TAFE Queensland, for example, the number one thing that's keeping CEOs awake at night is thinking that you don't know that the worker who's retiring today, the value of the knowledge in their head, how much that is going to dent your bottom line.
And it's making it easy for workers to record that information, because sometimes when, you've got to go into a CRM through 5 password protected pages and you've got to write notes, and, it's not that easy to do, or not, it takes a bit more effort. And so probably the workers are like, oh, whatever. Whereas if you're making it really easy, it's recorded, you've got a device that's making it just, really seamless experience, then they're going to be a lot more motivated to get that information out of their minds, and make a difference with that as well.
100%. 100%. And one other thing that's really important, by the way, that a lot of companies are getting very passionate about is AI, right? and they all see all these off-the-shelf AI flows, right? Where they can go, oh, I can spot a man versus a woman and a child, or I can spot if someone isn't wearing a helmet, and isn't that brilliant? You know, I can just plug and play this AI flow. But a lot of the things you would want AI to identify in an organization aren't just off the shelf. But to train a visual AI, like a camera, to spot something, you need 5 to 10,000 images of the thing you want it to spot. You need 5 to 10,000 images of the thing you don't want it to spot. And then you feed that for 3 months into a heterogeneous chip until it comes out with the AI at the end, right? How do you get 5 to 10,000 images? So this is the other thing, is that if people are doing standard operating procedures through this and they're recording data and they're taking photos, at some point you will have 5,000 photos of something. And that is needed if you want to train an AI. And this is by far the best way to gather that visual data. A lot of companies haven't realized that yet. They get so excited about AI, but the practicality of how you get the content to train it, they just haven't thought through, and wearables are a great solution for that.
And obviously it's so important to get that part right, because if you don't feed the AI the right information, then it's not going to work properly. And that's when, you know, there's the sort of the dangers of AI, is that it's not going to do what it's meant to do, and things like that. So switching gears a little bit, what are the cybersecurity considerations for wearables?
So some people get worried about the fact that you have workers who, you know, I'll put on another headset here.
I'm loving all the headsets. Yeah, it's great. Very visual.
Yeah. So this is the Microsoft HoloLens 2, which is actually a device that puts more like what we'd call stereoscopic full 3D augmented reality holograms on the world. So one of the, I mean, certainly you've got to ensure that your device hooks up to your enterprise management systems with your mobile device management, whether that is VMware or Intune, Microsoft Intune or SOTI or whatever. So make sure your devices are federated into that. And really, like this device, it doesn't just, you know, and this device doesn't just switch on and record through the camera consistently the whole time that you are out in the field. You know when somebody is in a call with you, and so, you know, but some companies, there are like very few in the world, sometimes want a little cover that they can just double ensure, you know, like, I mean, how many companies do you know provide an extra cover for your laptop to put over your camera at the top? I mean, no one really does that, but you can
Facebook
do that.
I saw a picture once, I think, of in Facebook, they will have extra covers. That's fair enough, they're Facebook.
Yeah.
But there's already...
It very much comes down to also the software you're using. If your software is extremely secure, you know, we work extensively with a platform called LiberStream out of Canada, and that is an extremely cyber secure remote expert collaboration tool that is so much so that it's used extensively by defense. It's the only platform that is allowed to be used around any Lockheed Martin aircraft, for example, because of the incredible IP that is around their engines and all that sort of thing. So it's down to the software that you use on the wearable device more so than the form factor of using the wearable, if that makes sense.
Well, I've got one final question. So recently you guys did a press release. You were featured in a number of articles about working with the APIAM Animal Health and MLA. Let me know what those stand for. And that's in the agricultural sector, but I'm keen to know, how are you working with the agricultural sector? Yeah,
sure. So APIAM, Animal Health, are they're a Victorian-based veterinary company that also has a lot of connections and operations overseas and in North America, etc. Probably one of the largest, you know, certainly rural veterinary companies in Australia. We're working with them to do a remote expert and workflows, for example, around feedlots. So your pen riders who are on horseback, you know, again, you've got to hold the reins and keep yourself upright. They put the device on equestrian helmets, and they're able to, if they spot a cow with bovine respiratory disease, record the number of that cow, record its condition, take a photo of it, and then, you know, the next day it will tell them, if they record that number again, that you've already looked at this cow and it wasn't in good nick, so you probably need to take it out of population and send it up to the animal hospital, etc. Or the fact that they need to, there's like organic meat processing facilities where they have to have a very like a visual record of any animal that has any sort of disease, because they're not using antibiotics, etc. So the vet can see through the meat processor's eyes and help make an assessment on what's going on with this particular animal that's come through the system. With the Meat and Livestock Association, were the catalysts. I mean, they're the RDC, the Research and Development Corporation, that first financed us to do some of the research in this area. But it really has led to a lot of excitement around the rural sector, where certainly the democratization of knowledge and the ability to remotely collaborate is so important, because the tyranny of distance is that you have to travel hundreds and hundreds of kilometers to go and service one farmer for whatever need that they have. So and farming is hands-on. I mean, APM says there is no way they could use handheld devices and do what they're doing around animals, because they'll get a hoof in the head and flat skull in no time.
Knocked over by a sheep.
Exactly. I mean, we've even had the device used on sheep shearers to be able to record how they do the shearing, because if you're coming into the industry as a sheep shearer, it's really hard to get an idea of the intricacy of what they're doing and how they're not damaging the sheep as they take off the fleece. So there's so many use cases in the rural sector for us. I mean, I love it as a job, because we get to deal with so many different industries and hear about all the friction points that they have. And it's quite amazing how just the ability to see through someone's eyes, to have that empathic view, is a massive solution off a standing start. And then to put things like, voice activated workflows, AI, IIoT, where you can see sensor data inside the headset as you're in front of a pump. It just builds and builds. But it's very heartening to now see, I guess we've probably reached like a critical tipping point of adoption. And I think now we're just exponentially accelerating in terms of people going, all right, this is actually not just for the innovation lab, this is an operational thing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I guess final question would be, how can people, if they're listening and they want to find out more, what would be the kind of call to action?
If you want to find out more, go to virtualmethod.com.au and just get in touch. Enquiries at virtualmethod.com.au. I'm happy to, I'll actually also, for your website, give you a link to a report that we did on making the business case for wearables inside the enterprise.
Great.
Because often the people who get it inside the enterprise, they need assistance, they need support to win over those naysayers, the ones who've made a career of saying no to things. This report will kind of help you validate the fact that there are so many organizations reaping enormous benefits and very, very quick ROI. I mean, we're talking ROI sometimes in the first half an hour, just from being able to double the efficacy of having a remote call with someone, and therefore reducing super expensive downtime, like a bucket wheel on a mine site that costs $10,000 a minute while it's not operating. So come to the website and get in touch, and I'm happy to have a chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing lots of advancements happening over the next couple of years. I'm going to go check out now what Apple are doing, because that sounds really interesting as well.
Well, there's not much around from Apple about it.
It's all secret at the moment, is it? Okay.
It's like Apple, it's incredibly secret.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, as someone who's been in the industry for 11 years, there are a lot of incredibly highly skilled people for the last 11 years that have been taking up new jobs inside, and this is the Silicon Valley terminology, an unnamed company in the Bay Area. And if they work for a company in the Bay Area, that's code for you're working on something super secret inside Apple.
Yeah. And because obviously their products will be more for consumers, but do you guys do anything that's for like the individual, or is it more kind of on an enterprise level? You do as well, okay. And what would be a use case for that?
We do a bunch of sort of augmented reality that's primarily through mobile at the moment for consumers, because mobile is the device that consumers have. So we're doing something for a big alcohol brand that's about to launch in the next week or two, which is a lot of fun, and with social sharing and all this sort of thing. And we're doing something right now for where I think I can speak about it now, but we're actually doing something really cool for Lendlease that is coming out next week. So, which is more of, it's B2B, I guess, but it's, you know, the nature of the content is more marketing, more sort of consumer facing.
And that'll all be on your website if people want to learn more about that in the coming weeks, you'll release.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep an eye out for it. I think there'll just be some media around about it.
Awesome. Very exciting. Well, thanks again for your time, David. Really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing what you do.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.